Here are 3 things that you need to know before you listen to this episode. Number 1, podcast consulting. So I'm now offering podcast consulting. I am holding your hand and showing you while you're in the driver's seat how to put together your podcast, whether you're going to DIY, outsource, whatever. We are going to be building podcasts together. If you'd like a spot at Podcast Consulting with me, there's an application link in the show notes, or DM me. My DMs are always open. Announcement number 2, if you'd prefer to learn at your own pace and all of it DIY, the Podcasting with Heart self-paced course is now available. I'm still in the middle of teaching it, so if you get the self-paced version, just note that as I teach the modules, they're being loaded into the portal. But that is an option. There's a link in the show notes. You can find out all the information. Announcement number 3, you've already heard me talk about the Birth Worker Retreat. It's 2.5 months away. So it's November. Our retreat is January 22nd, 23rd, 24th. In Clearwater Beach, Florida. It is a birth worker retreat with a focus on mind, body, business. I am opening 3 intensive spots, private one-on-one before and after the retreat. So if you plan on attending and you would like to book some private in-person time with me to get ish done, reach out to me, DM me ASAP to secure one of your spots, and we can book it around your schedule of when you're going to be arriving and when you plan on departing from the retreat. Side note, also related to the Birth Worker Retreat, there is a Black Birth Worker Scholarship available. So be sure to click the link in the show notes and apply if that's something that you feel like would be helpful for you. As always, if you have any questions, my DMs are open.
Hello. So everybody, welcome back. I want to introduce you to, well, you may already know her, but I'd like to formally introduce you again to Darcy. So she goes on Instagram, on social media by Doula Darcy. And I asked Darcy to come on the show today to tell us her business birth story. So we're bringing back the business birth story series. And I am going to be recording several of these with the different people who are co-facilitating and co-hosting the Birth Worker Retreat that we are going to be hosting in January in Clearwater, Florida. So if you haven't yet heard us talk about it or heard me talk about it on the podcast or heard Darcy talk about it, January 22nd, 23rd, 24th of 2024, Clearwater Beach, Florida. There is a link in the show notes. And there's also a payment plan option through Klarna. So you can choose to set up your own payment plan if that's something you'd like to do. And there's also a Black Birth Worker Scholarship. So we'll be spending 3 days focusing on mind, body, business. It's mostly focused around birth workers is kind of the thing. That's like our common denominator between Darcy, myself, and Caitlin McGraze of Be Her Village and Jody Congdon. Am I saying it correctly? Yes. Yep. I end up saying her last name, but I'm wondering Jody Congdon of Hip to Heart. So I've known Darcy for a while, and you've been on the podcast and we did the group interview, but I don't know your business birth story. I know you have a background in marketing and that's about it. So, I mean, I don't know how much you've shared your business birth story with everybody else as well. But yeah, I'm going to turn it over and just tell us the story. Like, how did you birth your business baby?
Oh my gosh. I love this question so much. And first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and to see you in real life in January. That's going to be so much fun. Because I live up in New England in New Hampshire. So Florida in January is just perfection. So it's going to be great. So yes, as you mentioned, I worked in advertising and marketing right out of college. That's what my degree was in. I had a job. I worked in Manhattan for a little while. I worked at a big ad agency in Princeton, New Jersey. And I was in my 20s and I loved it. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be this corporate advertising executive. And then we moved back to New Hampshire and we were going to start a family. And I was like, yeah, but I work in advertising and marketing. And then I had my first baby. And I was also a competitive gymnast like in childhood and high school. And so all I went into birth with was like this idea that, yeah, I think I want to do this without drugs, but more from like an athletic perspective. Like my goal would be to do this. And I think I can accomplish this. And I was a gymnast and I was a straight A student and I went to college and I have a good job. Like people say it's hard, but I'll be fine. So yeah. So I actually had a really great labor. Because actually I did a lot of yoga. So I kind of just settled into like some deep breathing and labored at home, got to the hospital. I was already at 7 centimeters. So I was like, see, I'm doing this. And then she was sunny side up. I pushed and pushed and pushed for hours and eventually ended up with a C-section. And the OB came in, the next day and said she said, she's like, the bones of your pelvis, you have a strange shape of one of the bones. And she's like, so 100 years ago, you both would have died. And I was like, oh, yay. She was trying to make me feel better because I was beating myself up for having a C-section. I was like, well, what is my problem? I'm a woman. We're supposed to give birth. So what's my problem if I can't do it? So she was trying to make me feel better. And it made me feel better for like 5 minutes, but then I got really thinking about it. But then that's a whole other story. But I had been awake, I labored through the night and the whole next day, and she was born via C-section at 3 hours of pushing, 6 p.m. she was born. So I missed a couple nights of sleep. I hadn't eaten that whole time, mostly just because I didn't feel like it. And so it was like this long 24 hours of labor and then a major surgery. I was exhausted. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, now my baby's here. I had visitors constantly. Like one would leave. I didn't rest at all in the hospital. Got home, ended up with an infection. I was back in the hospital. I had 102-degree fever. To make a long story short, felt like crap. And obviously, of course, I should have felt like crap. Like I just had a baby. I just had surgery. I had an infection. I was sick. But I was in my head, I was like, I'm doing this wrong. I'm not being a good mom because I had a fever. I just wanted to go lay down and sleep, but I had to breastfeed every hour and a half. And I thought I had to do all this stuff. And so, that just kind of got worse and worse and worse as the sleep deprivation kept going. And, a few weeks in, I remember like putting some dishes in the dishwasher and I was like, I'm so tired. Like I can't even keep the kitchen clean. And my mom was there helping me. My mother-in-law was there helping me. My husband was very helpful. I had tons of like people helping me, but I wasn't voicing any of this out loud. And I remember putting a dish in the dishwasher and hearing my OB say, well, 100 years ago, you and your daughter would have died. And I just thought, well, maybe we should have. Like, maybe I'm not cut out for motherhood. Maybe that's why I couldn't give birth. And so to make a very long story short, I obviously had postpartum depression, later anxiety, and quit my marketing job because I was having intrusive thoughts about everything, but specifically about putting my daughter in daycare. So I like a week before I was supposed to go back, I told my husband, I was like, I can't do it. Like, I physically am not going to be able to drop her off. He's like, well, do what you need to do. He's like, you're going to burn a bridge. You're not, you're not going to go back to that. You told them you were coming back, this marketing job I had. And I said, I don't know. I didn't even care. And so I quit. And I actually got a really nice letter from the CEO of the company at the time. And he sent me an email. He's like, Darcy, we're going to miss you. You've been a great asset to the company, blah, 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 blah. But this is a decision you'll never regret, which I thought was really nice. And certainly didn't regret it. So that whole experience eventually led me to become a postpartum doula. I became obsessed with telling my friends, with talking to anyone I met or knew who was having a baby. And I was like, listen, you think it's going to be rainbows and unicorns, but it is hard. So it's kind of just like being a postpartum doula. And then I started to, I had another baby and I got a job through a former employer. I was working at home a couple hours a day while my kids napped for Zanga, which this was like around the year 2000. They were if you were a teenager in the year 2000, you knew what Zanga was. It was a blogging website when blogging websites were huge. So I was working there and I read a blog about a postpartum doula, and I was like, oh, that it was like the clouds part. I was like, that is what I'm going to do. That is what I am meant to do with my life. And very quickly, my business birth story is like, I saw those words and then the universe was like, here, a donut training popped up an hour from my house. A couple weeks later, I think I was already a yoga teacher at that time. And then I just was like, well, now I'll do the 40-hour prenatal yoga teacher training. It was like the pieces all fell into place really quickly. So in 2010, I became certified, fully trained as a postpartum doula. And that's when I started my postpartum doula business here in Dover, New Hampshire. And just, I loved it. I loved going into new moms' homes and, first of all, just, holding the baby so that they could nap. That was my biggest thing, because I was just so tired. I ended up having 3 babies in 4 years, 3 C-sections in 4 years. So I was depleted beyond anything anyone ever should do. So I still do have this amazing passion for helping moms in those first 12 weeks. So it kind of just blossomed from there. And then I was able to, and I kind of went through the same thing, the experience that I hear so many other doulas say, that I was just so excited to learn that this was a job, to learn that this was a career, to take the training. I read all the books. I was just devouring information. I just so excited. And then I finished my training, got home, and I was like, okay, I'm a postpartum doula now. And I was just like, oh, wait a minute. I can't go on monster.com and find a postpartum doula job. I can't just, there's no line of pregnant people here at my house waiting for me. I kind of was like, I'm trained, everybody, like, where do I go? So I realized, I have to get my own clients. But I was lucky in that I was able to lean back on that marketing background and, use what I knew to really build up my own business, I think at a faster pace than most doulas do. So that was great. And then right before, so in like 2019, I'd been at it 9 years. I had opened an agency. I had 1 or 2 other doulas that were like helping me. I was doing days, they were doing overnights, and they were backing up or taking some more day shifts. And I remember standing in one of my clients' living rooms, just answering, we answer the same questions over and over again and have the same conversations. And I started to think, like, I really want to help more than just one mom a day. And I thought, I know there's so many other probably families on this block or in this neighborhood that need to hear this information that I'm telling them, or that need to just feel this compassion, that need someone to non-judgmentally listen to their birth story. I could probably throw a rock and hit 5 other families that need a postpartum doula. But I was like, how can I do that? How can I get this out to more people? And I also had been talking to other doulas, realizing many doulas struggle with the marketing side of things, with the getting clients. They're awesome doulas. They have the compassion, the empathy, the skills, the education, the training, all the certifications, but no one in their town knows they exist. So I thought, well, maybe I could be like a marketing and business coach for doulas. But I thought, that's not a thing. Who would do that? I can't do that. But that was in 2019. And so then in 2020, as COVID hit, and at the very beginning, the world shut down, I had existing contracts that I left their house on Friday, and Monday morning, they were like, don't come. No one, so I was just home. I started virtually, serving them. And so I thought, oh, maybe I could, the wheels started to spin. I was like, maybe I could virtually help multiple families at a time. And I did do that for a while, but then I just, then it really, it became apparent that this COVID thing was going to be more than 2 weeks of a shutdown. And I thought, well, maybe this is the time to go for this doula business coaching thing. So that's what I did. So I cut back on I kind of finished up my contracts, and I just took a couple virtual clients and then went all in on building the Doula Darcy into what it is now, 4 years later. So that's my story.
I have questions.
All right.
Thank you for sharing. I didn't realize that you shifted to helping other doulas market their business in 2019, because that was like right same time I did.
Well, actually, that's a cool part of this story, because I was like, being a doula business coach doesn't exist. And I think I started poking around on Instagram and found you. And I was like, oh, wait, okay. She's doing, kind of a similar, in 2019, you kind of were, you had programs for doulas.
Just started that.
Yeah.
That side of the business. I feel like, I was telling somebody yesterday, some women I was in a meeting with, like right now, I feel like I'm in the third building phase of my third business, but it was the first business was the pregnancy, the childbirth education, the virtual doula. Second business was teaching other doulas. And now I'm rebuilding the third business is teaching, beyond.
Yeah.
Birth professionals and beyond, right? Like, let's say it that way, entrepreneurs. But at this time, right, that was exactly what was happening in 2019 with me too. So that is so interesting. I didn't realize that.
Well, I kind of forgot about that, but you stumbling upon your Instagram page was a key part of me being like, oh, okay, wait, she's doing it. Okay. This, it's kind of like validation. Like, this is a good idea. I can do it. And very similarly, I think this is an interesting piece. So when I started my postpartum doula business, I finished my training, got a website, and I was like, I'm trained, I'm certified, but I still have some questions. Like, I would love to shadow another postpartum doula, or at least talk to one about, what you actually do in the home. I just had questions. And so I found this other postpartum doula in my area. But my marketing experience and brain were like, well, no, she is your competition. You have to establish your brand as competing with her and set yourself apart, show your differences from her. So that was my first thought. But I kind of, I started brainstorming, and then I was like, no, I'd really rather call her up and ask her some questions. And I'm so glad I did. It's Krista Malte, who is now one of my dearest friends. We're actually, this is very synergistic. She and I are presenting at the DONA Summit next week on collaboration over competition, because she was an amazing kind of mentor to me. And then we just partnered on so many marketing efforts. We had a collective for a while together. She's a dear, one of my dearest friends now. And it's been such a joy to think, oh, that was so much more fun and easier and really beneficial for both our businesses for us to collaborate and work together. So fast forward to 2019, when I found you on Instagram, the same thing. I was like, oh, she's already doing it. That means I can't do it. I was like, no, that means I can. That means that other people are interested in paying for these services. So I just wanted to
I'm glad you did that, because not everybody is going to resonate with me, and not everybody's going to resonate with you. And there's others now too, which is beautiful. There's options. Like, I couldn't possibly handle every single birth worker who wants business advice.
Exactly.
Neither could this one, and neither could that one. So that's kind of the whole point of this. And I'm trying to go back to remembering when I first remembered engage. I just don't remember. I felt like it was just very natural that we would talk to each other in our posts. And it felt very natural. And in 2018, I took my doula training, but I really quickly realized that being at the birth is not my way of helping. I love it and I'm passionate about birth, but that's not going to be my way of helping.
Hmm.
Not at this season.
Right.
And I made my childbirth education class virtual because I also couldn't be at anywhere outside of the house for that many hours away from all my little kids.
Right.
And then it just very naturally happened that people were like, teach us how to do this virtual, teach us how to do this virtual, teach us how to do. And I'm like, okay, I am answering so many DMs that I'm running out of minutes. I
Yeah.
can't answer everybody for free anymore because I don't have enough minutes. So
Yeah.
I have to create a way to do this in a way that suits my life. And they just like naturally happen that way. And I remember thinking, even back to digital doula, I have a journal somewhere where I was sketching ideas and I'm like, is digital doula even a thing? And I was looking for people who were doing it. I'm like, is anybody doing this? And I found at the time, like maybe one person who offered pregnancy coaching
Hmm.
virtually. And their accounts were not like actively being like, she had a website, but I saw
Yeah.
nothing on her Instagram, nothing on her Facebook. So I'm like, is she alive? Is she doing this? Is she around? Like, there's no activity here. There's no energy in her space. And I'm like, well, F it. I'm just going to do it.
I love
Um,
it.
but that's a really cool, I didn't know that. So that's really exciting to hear. Question. So I was thinking about, you may have seen me talk about this stuff. It's in different seasons of my business. I talk about different topics when it comes to like business, entrepreneurship. And so marketing, I really enjoy talking about too. But do you remember, like you said, you trained in 2010, you got your certification in 2010. Like what were the 2010 days, the version of marketing that you experienced in 2010? Like what were you doing in first? What were the things that you were doing?
Oh, I love that question. Facebook was where it was at. Facebook, this was back when Facebook was like really, there was no algorithm yet. It was just like,
Chronological.
exactly. And so I started to share posts that, hey, when you have a baby, I come take care of the baby and take care of you and you can nap. And people were like, this is amazing, and would share it. And then like I would have like, I can't remember, but hundreds of shares. Like today I post something amazing and it's like no one shares. It was just, it's even hard to explain the way Facebook was back then, but it was, you didn't spend any money, but even another part of my business that was that I eventually did some mom and baby expos, and Facebook was huge for those because everyone saw the event, shared it. And, it's like you didn't have to do much to get your posts seen. So Facebook was huge. I had I bought a website template from GoDaddy that was like that 5-page template that, it worked. And then I pounded the pavement. I networked like crazy. And I tell all my clients that was hard for me. I am yes, here I am on a podcast now, but I'm a true introvert. I don't like chit-chatting. But I wanted to be a doula so bad. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to put my kids in daycare. No shame on anyone who does, but first of all, I had 3 that needed it. I would have had to make $400,000.
Right.
So, and I didn't want to, it's like the whole, I didn't want to go back to a cubicle. I didn't want to go back to a marketing job that was fun and exciting and I liked it, but I didn't feel like I was making the world a better place. And now I had 3 little kids. I wanted to make, I think once you're a mom, you want to make the world better for your kids. So anyway, I reached this point where I was like, I'm not going back. So if I want to do this doula work, I have to go network. I would give myself a little pep talk like, Darcy, okay, you're going to go in there and you're going to smile and you're going to chit chat and you're going to tell them, you're a postpartum doula.
Commercial break. HoneyBook. I've got to tell you about HoneyBook. So I know what you might be thinking. Just because I have an online business and a podcast and I do a lot of this myself, that I must be super tech savvy. I'm not. I'm an elder millennial self-taught on all things technology. And one of the things that I found incredibly difficult in terms of technology is one of the big CRM systems when I first got into this business. CRM is client relationship management, by the way, meaning you can send contracts, get virtual signatures, you can send invoices, and lots of other things. The big one that rhymes with Tupsado, but starts with a D, I just could not get past the level of difficulty and complexity. So when somebody introduced HoneyBook to me, they had me at the option of doula when you're entering your information and you enter the kind of services that you provide. So for several years now, I've been using HoneyBook as my client relationship management system where I send contracts, send invoices, and manage those one-on-one private client relationships. My affiliate link is in the show notes. I would love it if you'd give it a trial run and see if you like it. And if you do, let me know. If you have any questions, as always, reach out.
So, and I mean, had done a lot of like networking and chamber of commerce events and stuff in my marketing, advertising days. So I did have that experience, but what I loved was it actually ended up being easier. I had such, it's Michael Hyatt that says marketing is really just about sharing your passion. So I used to have to go to these chamber of commerce cocktail parties and talk to these bankers and, about ad revenue, blah, blah, blah. Like it was torturous, but like going into a chiropractor's office to talk about why his patients need to also be having a postpartum, that was my passion. I could talk for hours about it. So it ended up, I was like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. So to answer your question, it was Facebook and personal connections in my community with other people that were dealing with pregnant people. So chiropractors, other doulas, the photographers, all those people. So yeah, Instagram didn't exist.
Networking with people who are not in the industry. So one of my past lives was, and not like actual soul's past life, but like this life's past life,
Yeah.
And I did residential mortgage lending. And so I was residential first and then moved to commercial and managing real estate funds, commercial real estate funds for private equity investors and such. And so anyway, back in residential lending, the networking was like, you go to happy hour. That's where all the realtors were.
Yeah.
And it was all men. And I was like young and not married. And I'm like, that's a recipe for disaster. Like nobody's taking me seriously. I show up to the network at happy hour and they're like, hey, babe. It was like, I hated it. And it made my skin crawl. I would sweat, or I would go to CABA. So in this one part of Tampa is Carrollwood. So it's Carrollwood Area Business Association. They have these rules where you can only have one lender per group and one realtor per group. And everybody comes and you share all the cards. And you're like, if you have a lead, you send it to her. And you have a lead. It doesn't even matter what kind of relationship you have with the person. And I just felt like I hated doing those things. So I get it, because now if I got something networking, it's different. It's such different. And so, yes, I remember that. And it was awful. And I'm so glad we don't have to do that. And
I know.
About the cubicle, it's like choose your card,
Yes.
So for cubicle life it sounds like death to me. It's torturous, especially with children. And right now we're really young. And to think that I could be in a cubicle, and I know for some people I don't feel this way, but for me, to be in a cubicle while the kids are getting off school at 3:00 or whatever, they have to wait for me to come see them. I just can't. So it's choose your hard. It's going to be hard to show up on video at first. It's going to be hard to write a post. It's going to be hard to do all those things. Yes, but what's harder? Like pick your heart, right?
Yep.
And to me, agreed. Like you sometimes you do things that are uncomfortable with the goal in mind.
Yes.
So another question I have is, I was even thinking recently about, and I used to write about this more on social media. Maybe I'll bring it back when I talk about marketing again, of like the old days of marketing when it was like, there wasn't even Facebook, where you wrap your car in like the magnet stuff and the plastic, and you're in yellow pages. Like my dad advertised in the yellow pages. That's it.
Yep. Oh yeah. So when I worked in advertising and marketing, like before Facebook, but before I started my doula business, before the internet really, if you were a mom who wanted to start a small business, you had to put up a ton of money to hire a videographer, take a day to record some videos and then buy the time on the local cable channel. And it was really expensive. And then you could also buy radio time, and it was really expensive. And people heard it and then forgot it. And, you could also buy ads in the local newspaper. And I had one boss who was always like, he liked when we put ads in the newspaper. He didn't like when they would call us about remember all the trash, like in the middle of the newspaper, like just the ads. He was always like, we're not putting our clients in there. He's like, that's what people line their bird cages with. So I always share that perspective when I'm working with doula clients now who don't want to post on social media, or they hate social media, or Instagram's so hard. And I think it's free though. And you can make a video in 5 seconds from your phone, put it out there, and it's like having a conversation with your dream client. And back in the 90s, you had to spend $50,000 to get that same level.
And if you didn't have a budget, right? Like my dad started his tire store in 83. Year I was born. I'm telling you my age. You already know. Started his tire shop in 83, and the way they got clients in the beginning was they would take all these used tires, because he was primarily doing used tires. Some new, but they would take a truckload of used tires to the flea markets on Friday or on Saturday, Sunday, whatever days the flea markets were open. And they would run up at the flea market and sell used tires for $5. And then if you wanted to get it put on the vehicle, you come to the shop on Monday and I'll put it on.
Ah,
That's how they started getting people to the tire store. And they didn't have marketing money. They were in the yellow pages, and they used the, whenever the booth cost or whatever it was to be the flea market. And people would come on Monday like, hey, I bought this from you on Saturday. Can you put it on my car? And so then they know that they can just come back here instead of going to the flea market. So it's just funny thinking back of my mom. Just one quick funny thing, because I think you'll appreciate this. I don't know if you've ever heard this. I talked about it at one point. My mom, she is also a serial entrepreneur. She's a creative, and she has a lot of different creative outlets throughout her life. And at one point, she's a hairstylist. And so she was one of the first Caucasian women in Tampa that was really big in doing hair extensions in the 80s. So all the exotic dancers, all the strippers, like Tampa was kind of known, and still kind of is known to be like a stripper hub, right? It's a gentleman's club hub. And she would, to advertise the business, like she obviously had hair extensions, but she would make, because she's very creative, she would make outfits to sell, like what's the word? Costumes. She would make costumes, like pasties with tassels and all this and G-strings with like tassels and gems and crystals. And she'd make these really ornate for the 80s. They were like killing it.
Yeah.
And I was little, and I remember like, what are those? And she's like, they're Barbie hats, the pasties. And she was quick on her feet. And I'm like, Barbie, but why is there two that match? And she's like, twins. So she would make these outfits and sell them backstage at
my God,
at the clubs. And so the women that were back there, while she was back there selling costumes to the women, she's like, let's talk hair.
Yeah.
And she has, $700, $800 hair extensions and braids and $1,000. And, so anyway, it was just, you had to get so creative in a different kind of way back then. But I do find it really interesting, the conversations we have now. Like, we're so afraid of putting ourselves out there, and I'm sure you see this a ton too. But it's like, it's a free freaking broadcast channel.
Well, yes. And it's funny because in the 80s and 90s, it was like, how can we get ourselves out there? What is something free we could possibly do? The big thing was if you could get like a press release, if you could get coverage on the local news or the newspaper, because that's free, because it's news. And now it's funny to hear entrepreneurs, new doulas or doulas saying, I don't want to put myself out there. And I'm like, but that's the point. And my funny story is the ad agency I worked at in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at one point, he was like, we need to drum up new business. Like, we need to come up with an idea. And he ended up renting an ice cream truck. And we drove around Portsmouth, New Hampshire, handing out free like hoods. I don't know. You probably don't know what it is. It's a little hoodsy cup. It's a New England thing. But we just playing the music of the ice cream truck, and we just went into all the businesses handing out free ice cream. And he was like, maybe the paper will see us and come. Like, that was the goal. Like, create some kind of buzz that'll get a photographer from the newspaper. And it's just funny to think, like, it was so much work, and we had to buy the hoodsy cups, pay for the rent, the ice cream truck. And I think now it's like, I just make a reel.
It's at your fingertips.
Right? It's so
Like, it's
easy.
literally at your fingertips.
Yes.
And I agree. So I do have another question too, is that was fun. I have another question about, you probably noticed this too, but I'd love to hear your perspective. I felt like in 2018, 2019, when I was first really getting into the birth business,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, where are all of the doulas? Like, I would see them at a local meetup, or I would Google and I would see some websites. So I'm like, okay, there are doulas here, but where the hell are they on social media? Like, nobody's on social media. I felt like meant collectively a lot, not all, but a
Mhm.
lot of doulas were like in the dark ages. And I'm like, where are you guys? Like,
Yeah.
you're unfindable.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Yeah.
felt like there was this big movement that can we give ourselves a little credit here?
Yeah.
Like, I think you and I both were, and others were really helpful at helping bring them front and center. Like, hey,
Yes.
bring you out of hiding, right?
Yes. Yeah. Like, you have to do this.
And now they're killing it. Like, I see birth workers killing it on TikTok, on
Oh,
Instagram,
yeah.
like thousands of views and reels. And like, I don't care about engagement, but I care about getting the message out, and the message is getting out.
Yes, absolutely. And social media is such a great tool to do it. Well, and just from like an evidence-based perspective, that's where our clients are. They're hanging out on Instagram, social media, TikTok for hours a day. So as doulas, we have to be showing up there. And like you said, we are now, but still some aren't. I mean, I always talk about, I am engaging with doulas on Instagram all the time and checking out doula Instagrams. And it's like some you go and they have like 3 posts and they haven't posted in 6 months. And actually you were saying this about, so when you were looking up, if you haven't posted in a few months, you assume they're out of business.
Mhm.
So, that's a big thing I talk about, is that, you need to be consistent. You need to not only create an account, but, post every couple of weeks at least.
Like, take the pressure out of it. And one of the easy things that I think people will appreciate if they hear this episode is, like, the way I look at social media sometimes is not so much I have to promote, sell, but like, this is a container where we can have conversations virtually.
Mhm.
What if you walked into a building and if you had an expo, if you were able
Yeah.
to attend an expo with pregnant people any moment of every day, what would you say? What would you talk about? What would you share with them? What would they need to hear? You have the
Mhm.
opportunity to effectively, you're like creating your own little mini expo here. Anytime you
Yes.
want. And that's all it really is talking and getting your message out. And it's a channel that you can use to broadcast your message. One of, right? There's multiple. There's podcasting, there's
Right.
Pinterest, which is not really social media. It's a search engine, but then there's different social media platforms, and there's all these ways that you can create that experience without having to get a vendor booth, without having
Right.
to, like, ways that people can feel you when you're not there,
Yes.
when you don't have to be
Absolutely.
physically present
Right.
every single moment, but you can, put a little deposit into your space like that. So, yeah, I think that's something that could be really helpful to remember for anybody who feels like, oh my God, I don't know what to post. I don't know what to post. And if you get up in your head about it, then yeah, it's going to be more of that. I don't know what to post, so I won't post. I don't know what to post, so I won't post.
Yes.
And to get out of the loop, you just freaking post.
Right.
Do something.
Yeah.
What would you do if we were sitting across from each other and I were pregnant, which I'm not, but what would
Yeah.
what would you tell me? If I'm like, hey, what do you think I need to know? I'm 12 weeks. Like, what would be most helpful? Talk to me. And just talk
Exactly.
like that.
Right. I know it's a great chance for doulas. I talk a lot about how, we're not selling cars. We're selling our energy, really. No one hires a doula. People hire their doula because they connect with them. They connect with their personality, their energy, and yes, their credentials. But at the end of the day, you choose the doula that is going to see you naked or that's going to come into your home. Like it's a very personal decision. So, social media is a great place to get your authentic personality and energy across for
Yeah.
free. Versus, it's a lot harder to do on a business card or email, unless you put a video in it. But, I think, yes, we all love to hate social media, but embracing it for what it really can do
Mhm.
to help you be a doula is,
Leverage the tool.
yeah,
Leverage the tools that you have that we didn't have access to early on in the business days, or
mhm,
our parents or our grandparents. They didn't have access. So why are we not
right,
leveraging the tool? And we're talking for birth workers, but even outside of the birth worker industry, I speak to a lot of people who are healers and yoga instructors and all kinds of other
mhm,
industries. And it applies across the board because we are so wrapped up in our heads. But I do think it gets to be a lot easier.
mhm,
Um, so the last thing I want to ask, since we're going to be at the retreat together, and that's
yes,
part of why I wanted to have you on, is so people could get to know you
mhm.
and who are coming to the retreat that may not know you yet. Do you want to highlight or preview any bit of your workshop, your
Ooh.
segment that you're going to be speaking on when we have the
Yes.
retreat?
Oh, yes. Thank you for this chance to do this. I'm so excited because I'm going to be nerding out on one of my new favorite topics, which is kind of aligning your business with your cycle, and that we are all cyclical beings, and um, that just I'm going to be teaching about as and this could be even if you don't menstruate, you can deal. Um, Work around the cycles of the moon, but like and I feel like doulas really need to be knowing this. There's 4 seasons, there's 4 cycles, 4 phases of the moon, there's 4 trimesters. That's a little bit of a stretch, and then there's 4 weeks of our cycle. And each we're kind of a lot, our hormones line us up for certain tasks at each stage of our cycle. And so I'm going to be teaching how to tap into that, harness that, and it really becomes a superpower for your business because it's kind of like paddling downstream. It just makes everything easier when you're working in alignment with your own body, with nature, instead of making it harder and feeling like you're paddling upstream and just expending. It comes down to expending too much energy. So this helps you kind of conserve your energy. So I'm really excited to dive into that in January in Florida. Gonna have some fish tacos, go on the beach. It's gonna be great.
And warning to anybody who comes to that talk, or really anything that all of us are going to be speaking about, it may require you to take a look at your belief system around what you're
Mhm.
supposed to be doing in your business, in your life,
Yes.
in motherhood, in all of these areas. So it may be a little uncomfortable, but if you're
Mm.
open to growth and evolution and expansion, then this may be the place that
Yeah.
we help you with that. So
Yeah. So, and it really comes down to, working with your cycle comes down to working smarter, not harder. Like that's one thing that I've really had to work at to bust up this myth that being successful means working harder, or to earn more money, you have to work harder. And it's really not true. So we'll be diving into that more.
I totally agree. And I'm excited. I can't
Yeah.
wait.
I can't wait to meet you in person because
Same.
yeah. So this will
Same.
be great.
Yay. Well,
Yay.
thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
Awesome. And I'll share your social media stuff and all the things in the show notes so people who haven't met you yet can connect with you.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Find me on Instagram, the Doula Darcy. Shoot me a DM. Tell me you heard this podcast, and then come have a margarita with me in Florida.
And
Nicole.
share it. Feel free to share the show too.
Yeah.